Assalamu alaikum and good evening, dear viewers. Bangladeshi community-based newspaper Suprabha Sydney try to always organize some sort of face-to-face live, but this time we are delighted to organize such a very important face-to-face live regarding the Gaza, the Rafah base, whatever happening in there. Recently, we have seen different groups travel there. We are so fortunate that we actually found someone from Sydney, Mr. Dr. Siraj Sira, is our guest today, and we try to take him in our special guest. I would like to welcome Mr. Dr. Siraj Sira. How are you, Mr. Sira? Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Naman. Thank you for having me on your show today.
Thank you very much once again, dear viewers. I would like to introduce a few little words about Dr. Siraj Sira. He is actually the general practitioner based on Western Sydney. Also, he is the co-founder and the chairperson of Global Medical Foundation Australia, what is totally a non-profit organization. I would like to say a few words about Mr. Sira. Their organization normally does work for the homeless people, like feeding them, and wherever the humanitarian crisis, they're normally there. We've been seeing this brother and his other fellow members of their organization member. They travel different areas, especially I think 2023, if I'm not wrong. They traveled to Rohingya camp in Bangladesh, where is in Teknaf, probably one of the biggest refugee camp in the world. And recently he came back from Rafah, Gaza. So actually our show especially is organized to listen from him, because he just came back, I think definitely just a couple of weeks ago. We just want to welcome Mr. Sira, and we'd like to listen from him how and why he decided to go such a dangerous place. We know that how Israeli army and the Israeli troops is like occupied the Gaza and the Rafah border, and this is have some sort of courage to go there, taking your own life in the hand, because you don't know what's going over there. It's totally out of because all the media is banned over there. We know that a little bit of news comes out. Definitely, this is the reason we'll try to listen from Dr. Siraj. Please welcome again, and I just would like to ask you the main reason, like how you get motivated and why you have decided to go to Gaza, Mr. Siraj.
Thank you, Naman, for the introduction. So, Global Medical Foundation Australia is a not-for-profit organization which, with a couple of friends and we formed about 10 years back. And since its inception, we've been doing multiple medical camps all around the world, wherever there's a need. Since 2010, we've been to Africa, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, the Rohingya refugee camps, to Jordan, where the Zaatari camps looking after the Syrian refugees during the crisis there, and most recently to Gaza. To answer your question, why did we go there? Ever since I remember growing up, Gaza has been one of those places which has been oppressed. So Gaza, and for all of us, we have a special place in our hearts for Gaza. And even before the crisis started, we were actually trying to collaborate with our doctors and an organization who are on the ground to help the elderly people with doing local projects there. Just when we were able to facilitate that, the war started on October 7th, and the doctors were in touch with us regularly, and they were sending us pictures and videos of the devastation which was happening on the ground. So we just couldn't sit and watch what was happening. So we thought we'll try and help to the best we can. So we put a team together. We had a couple of surgeons and myself. We partnered with the organization which was already we had a good working relationship with, and then we had to procure permits from the UN, and alhamdulillah, we were able to procure that, and then from the 15th to the 29th of April this year, we entered into Gaza through Cairo. So the first day, I mean, look, this was something which was risky, but people have asked me this question: why did we go? Look, as a person of belief, as a person of faith, we all know that when your time is up, your time is up. So We put our trust in Allah's hands and God's hand, and we said, look, let's do what we can and do our best to help the people of Gaza.
Well, okay, Mr. Just 1 second. Yeah, Mr. Siraj, Dr. Siraj, what I'd like to say. So you entered into Gaza, but how difficult was it? Like, did you had to go through some sort of difficulties or some sort of procedure? Because we know there is a war, there is a bombing, there is a military, there is Israeli occupation over there. Like, each and everything. You've been definitely be aware of that. But how you managed to control that to enter in Gaza? I just would like to start from there because this is a big question because everybody can it's not allowed to go outside people to go there, so how that
Correct.
is happening?
So we had to take the permits through the UN, the United Nations. So we had to go through specific training to get in there. It took almost about a month for us to go through the training and go through the permits. So we reached Cairo. There was a briefing for us in Cairo for the volunteers, and it was a 5.5 hours drive from Cairo to Rafah, to the Egyptian border of Egyptian side of the Rafah crossing, which is now doesn't exist anymore. That was destroyed. So at the Rafah crossing, we were there for about 7 hours till we got our luggages screened. We had to take our own supplies of food, water, and the medical aid which we were carrying. So we were thoroughly screened, and we entered into Rafah. It was almost night time when we entered Rafah. As soon as you entered Rafah, what we heard was the sound of drones. There was constant drones. We could hear gunshots at a distance. There was bombing happening. We were asked not to travel at night time. We were taken in a security van, under the protection of the UN, umbrella of the UN. We were transported to a place called Safe House, which we were staying where all the humanitarian organizations, the volunteers representing them, stayed. This was a deconflicted area where the Israeli forces could not attack or bomb while we were there. Having said that, there's no safe place in Gaza. So there was a risk no matter where we went. So the risks were there, but Alhamdulillah, we had to have our own security personnel. They were coordinating with a group called COGAT and the CLA, which are the Israeli organizations, which told us which way to take, what time to leave from the safe house to the hospitals where we were working, and every movement of ours was coordinated. We could not leave the place without the permission of COGAT. So we had our own security personnel who were coordinating our movements through COGAT and the CLA.
Mr. Siraj, I would like to ask you a very beginning question. The first day in Gaza, how you entered and what you actually have seen. Like, you definitely have some sort of fear, some sort of demolition or like demolished area, because after war, after bombing, you definitely know what sort could happen. But is
Yeah.
it that you've been expecting or what you have seen the first hand?
What we saw, words cannot describe what you saw, what I saw, what we experienced. My first week was at a place called Rafah, and in a place called Tal Sultan, where I worked in the community center, which is like a small medical center. The roads, the first thing which hits you is the number of tents there are. There are a lot of overcrowded tents in the footpaths, lining the streets. Kids running around. There's garbage everywhere. There's stench of garbage. There's constant drones and bombing happening at a distance. There's sewage spilling out onto the roads. Um, every tent had about 10 or 15 people living inside it, and there were about one or two toilets, and about 100 to 150 people shared one toilet. There was no electricity, there was no water, there was no clean drinking water. There would be a water tank which would come and distribute water, and kids in their little hands would be holding these water containers trying to fill the water for the day. um, there was not enough food to eat. The place where I was working, we saw lots of diarrheal diseases due to lack of sanitation. Just imagine, brother, sharing one toilet amongst 150 people with diarrhea happening. There's no clean drinking water. People,
Yeah,
not able to
seems
wash
very
their hands.
impossible.
It's
Seems
terrible. Just imagine this. Just imagine ourselves doing that for 1 day, 2 days. But these people have been experiencing that for 9 months now. There was a hepatitis A outbreak, which is a virus which can inflame the liver, and sadly, we were seeing deaths from hepatitis A. There were not many medications to treat people with for the infections that they were having. There were chronic diseases flaring up. Things like diabetes, things like blood pressure, cancers. Now, people who were missing the bombs and getting, the dodging the bombs, they were dying because of the complications of not having enough medications. I also worked in a nutrition center which was attached to the primary health center. Sadly, that doesn't function anymore because of the invasion of Rafah, which has happened after we've come back. What we saw was malnourished children. Now, just before we entered into Rafah, we saw hundreds and hundreds of trucks packed with food, water, medical aid sitting, at least 500, 600 trucks. On the other side, I was treating malnourished children. So 1 in 3 children in the north of Gaza at that stage were malnourished, and 1 in 10 children in Rafah were malnourished. But that statistics is almost is it's a lot worse now. We were seeing deaths from children with malnutrition. Now, women themselves who are malnourished were not producing enough breast milk to feed these babies. They were giving birth to low birth weight babies, and these babies did not have the capacity to fight off infections. And because of the overcrowded situation, the people are living in tents, people are living in schools, in mosques. So there was no privacy for women to breastfeed children, breastfeed their babies. And imagine our wives, our sisters being put in a position, and these women, these people have been experiencing this for 8 to 9 months now without us doing anything about it. So my first week, it was nothing could prepare us to what we saw, the amount of humiliation people were going through, the amount of trauma, the amount of anxiety and desperation people were going through. Im- Fathers would come into the health center and say, my children have not eaten, have not had milk for what 2 days, 3 days. They're hungry. Is there any milk for my children? That was really gut wrenching to see so much desperation in people and so much helplessness in people.
Mr. Siraj, I'd like to ask you next question is so the main reason when to gets into the medical board or like the medical groups, so you can work through to provide the better help who are actually needed in the hospital. That is the main reason you went there.
The main reason why we went there was to help people. As medical professionals, we are in a position to go and treat. So our surgical colleagues, we took surgical supplies with us. I also happened to work in the hospital in a place called Dar al Bala and Al Shifa in Al Aqsa Hospital. So with my surgical colleagues, and the injuries in my first week in the primary health center, I saw a lot of infections. But in my second week, I was actually seeing a lot of injuries from bomb blasts, from shrapnel injuries, from traumas. So my surgical colleagues were operating on young children. I'll give you an example. So on the first or second day we were there was a young child who was brought in, 6-year-old child. His name was Hamza. Now this boy was playing with his brother next to his tent in the ground, and they were hit by a missile. And this boy had shrapnel attacks to his head, to his chest, to his abdomen. He had holes in his intestines. So my surgical colleague took him to the theater. We operated on him. He, very sadly, he passed away the next day. And the brother his brother who was there, also injured. 2 days later, he passed away. So in a blink of an eye, the family had lost two of their children. We saw a young girl called Fatima. Fatima was 7 years old. The building which she was in got bombed, and this child had lost her left arm. She came in with her parents, wrapped her left arm in a towel, and brought it to us to say, "Can you fix my daughter's arm?" These are the sort of pictures which you don't see. There was a young boy called Jamal who had some horrific injuries we have seen to shrapnel. He had torn open his abdomen. He came in with his intestines hanging out. He came in with intestines coming out of his buttock area. And sadly, we operated on him, but sadly, there was no place for him in the hospital in the intensive care unit. So this child There was no pain medications. After such horrific injuries, he got Panadol, and sadly, he died after the night after the surgery. I mean, we don't see all this on TV. We don't see all this in channel. All these sort of things are not broadcasted. But the amount of trauma injuries we saw was devastating. And the doctors there are tired. They've been going on seeing this time day in and day out for the last 9 months. So the reason why we went was to offer our support to the doctors there, medical doctors, surgical doctors, to help them to treat patients together as as brothers in medicine.
So it's a very good, interesting couple of questions is raised from your discussion. I think one of them is, as a professional practitioner, is definitely you are bound. You maybe have mentally get prepared like this sort of scenario you're gonna get witnessed, but the amount of trauma, amount of dangerous situation you've been explaining last couple of minutes, I think as normally don't see open in Australia or like rest of the world, because everyone is nice and peacefully, everybody is living. But how hard was for you to concentrate on your practice as well as like you've been there for helping? Also, I would like to elaborate another question on top of that. Supply medical condition. If you don't have enough equipments, enough medicine, you really can't do proper treatment. So these two questions: how did you concentrate, and what sort of medical equipment or the advantages or like other things you actually all the sources been you had in your hand, Mr. Siraj?
So it was challenging to treat. As a general practitioner, I had limited access to medications. For example, medications to treat diabetes, to treat hypertension. So there was very limited medications. Painkillers were limited, except for some simple paracetamol and ibuprofen. We did not have a third agent. So we actually took with us, between the seven of us who were there, three from Australia and four from the US, we had about 45 bags of supplies which we took with us. We took antibiotics. We took surgical equipment with us. We had gowns. We had staples. We had everything which we required to operate. But while we were there, we were in a position where we could operate. But we were hearing stories from the hospital where women were going through cesarean sections without an anesthesia. There were no medications to deal with post operation. We You would not believe, now Gaza has got the highest number of amputees, and our surgical colleagues were amputating because of the injuries the people were coming in with. And there was wards full of amputees, with some people having had three limbs amputated, some people having had two limbs amputated, children having had amputations. It's the amount of devastation which the people of Gaza have gone through or are going through. It's gut wrenching. And to answer your question, how could we have prepared ourselves? There was no way we could prepare ourselves. We were seeing pictures of what was coming out through Instagram and those sort of things. But until you go in a situation and you are in that situation, yes, the bombs were going off, the buildings would shake. There was you at times you would think, yeah, the roof is going to fall on you now. Anytime the glass is going to shatter anytime. There was an instance where I was working in a primary health center, and we were hit by a missile, and we were very close to us, and the shrapnel tore through the roof and landed in the consultation room where I was standing, where I was practicing. And this child had an injury to his right elbow. And nowhere it is safe in Gaza. When you come back, you realize that when you're there, you're constantly, you're looking at one patient, you're going after the next patient, you're trying to save lives, you're trying to manage, you don't think about these sort of things. But when you actually come back and reflect on what just happened, what you saw, what you dealt with, that when it hits you, I've left my colleagues there. There's not much medication in the hospitals anymore. There's not much food. Things are getting worse. We are in touch with the medical students there who helped us with translation. We are in touch with the doctors who helped us or we worked with. And the stories which we are hearing still, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling how we as the international community have not been able to help the people of Gaza effectively.
So, Mr. Sira, I would like to ask you another question from your discussion. You said that even the hospital is not safe enough from bombing. But what is then? My question is how the UN is like. You said that you had a special some sort of security and gone through, and you said that not to go into that zone because it's not safe enough for that time period. But how come like international, all the humanitarian, all the UN is there, how come the hospital getting bombed? So you have seen that hospital getting bombed. I would like to ask you one more question. As the hospital could be the most safest place for whoever much needed to get the treatment, how the civilian getting they're resistant in there? Have you seen the civilian could do any sort of resistance from the Israeli attack?
So what we saw, so to answer your question, so we in the hospital there were not only patients, there were also civilians. Every inch of the hospital where we were was lined by people. There were bed sheets, they were sleeping on bed sheets. Every corner of the hospital was taken by people who were trying to live there. Hospital was meant to be a safe place, which means that they were meant to be given a warning before they got bombed. For example, a Shifa hospital. What happened to a Shifa hospital? Now, recently, you may have heard of the EGH hospital, where our colleagues also work there, and that hospital had to be evacuated completely. Where people sick, amputated people with amputees, they had to leave the hospital. So while we were there in Al-Aqsa Hospital, we saw every inch of the hospital being taken by civilians, not necessarily patients, because the thought was the hospitals was a relative safe place where they would be given warning before they got bombed. um, and that sort of blanket of safety was not there for anywhere in the tents. We are even hearing of places like Khan Yunus or Dar al Balag, Khan Yunus being bombed on a regular basis, and Rafah recently being bombed on a regular basis. So, look again, the thought process of the locals were the hospital is a safe place, and so they were living inside the hospital purely from protection. I saw lots of children inside the hospital. It had become their second home, and we got close to a few kids who would come to us, who would ask for chocolate every now and then, and things. I mean, kids being kids, so it had become a home for them. So it is very difficult. There's no safe place in Gaza at the moment, and the safest place what you think of would be a hospital.
So like we've been watching from the news that Hamas or like other been actually doing their resistance against ADF, Israel Defense Force. Is it actually been true, the true story? Have you seen that actual fight between civilian or like Hamas or Israeli Defense Force? I don't know
So
because we've been watching the
we
news
were
here.
our group was there. I was there from the 15th to the 29th of April, and we did not see a single foot soldier of IDF, nor did I see anything suspicious happening inside the hospital. So I would leave this question at that.
And the we are pretty much very end of our show. I would like to ask you, based on your experience from Gaza, what you'd like to elaborate from for the rest of the world, rest of the community, to helping, or what is your appeal? I would like to say you can take few minutes to explain everything, all your appeal for the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, look, the people of Gaza are tired. The doctors are tired. They've gone through this for, in fact, years, and now the last 9 months has just been suffering beyond what words can describe. I've heard stories where one of my translators, a young lady called in the name of Islam, whose name was Islam. Now she would have been graduating this year as a dentist. So she sent me some. She has had to relocate from the north to the south, and from south now she's in a camp somewhere. So she sent me pictures of how they had no drinking water, clean drinking water, and they had to resort to drinking seawater. Can you imagine drinking seawater month, day in and day out? People of Gaza are suffering. They've suffered enough, and we as an international community should rally behind an immediate ceasefire, hopefully a permanent ceasefire, yeah, and have a voice where there is unrestricted food and medical aid entering into Gaza. Yes, there are thousands of deaths which are being reported, but there'll be many, many more deaths from starvation, from children not having enough food, malnutrition in children getting worse, famine. So we, over the next months to years, this figure is just going to escalate, not necessarily from bombing maybe, but due to infections, complication of infections. We need to have medical teams going in there. We need to have medical aid going in there. We need to have food supplies going in there. We need to have, we need to be the voice and advocate immediate ceasefire, permanent ceasefire, solution to bring an end to this war. And as humans, just think about it from a humanitarian perspective. One human being trying to help another human being, taking out religious aspects or political aspects out of it. But immediately, what I would call for, what our group would call for, is an immediate ceasefire and an unrestricted entry of medical and humanitarian aid into Gaza.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Siraj Sira. I think our viewers is definitely had a good picture what Mr. Siraj been witnessed in Gaza. Definitely, I would like to say a few words about with respect with Dr. Siraj. What he has seen definitely is need more medical practitioner, more aid, and we are all human. I think when we are in crisis, we should help each other. That would be the best treatment for rest of the human being. So if any of those could come and help sake of Gaza, they can communicate with us. Our email address is shuprabhat.ceo@gmail.com.au. And Dr. Siraj is a general practitioner in Parramatta Base in Sydney. If anyone is interested, you can definitely keep in touch with him. And I would like to thank you, Mr. Dr. Siraj Sira again. Thanks for your time, valuable time, especially on Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening from your family away. And once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Raman. Thank you for having me on the show.
Okay, dear viewers, that's all from tonight. Hopefully, we'll come back in with another show very soon. Until that, good night.
Good night.